Greetings, friends. It is my great pleasure to bring you an interview with a friend of mine and a scholar, Reverend Dr. Dwight Vogel, who's the main editor of the Lukan Psalter, a new translation of the Psalms just published this year, 2020, that we are utilizing as our primary translation of the Psalms for the Worship Design Studio series, God is Holding Your Life, a journey of assurance for the new year. The subtitle of the book is According to the Usage of the Order of St. Luke, and you're going to hear more about the Order of St. Luke in our interview. Dr. Vogel was a United Methodist pastor at St. Luke's in Dubuque, Iowa, and then a professor at Westmar College for 20 years before becoming the Ernest and Bernice Steiberg Professor of Worship at Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary, where he is now Professor Emeritus. And we are very pleased to have his scholarship and to have his insight into the Psalms. I know you're going to enjoy this interview. Well, Dwight Vogel, it is a pleasure to be with you, and thank you so much for agreeing to talk with us here in the Worship Design Studio about a Lukan Psalter that you are one of the editors on, and it's perfect that we are getting to hear from you as we prepare for this series called God is Holding Your Life, a journey of assurance with the Psalms for the new year. So thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, I'm going to tell a couple stories just about my connection to you and to the Order of St. Luke, of which you are a part. I knew you probably first through North American Academy of Liturgy, and specifically through your beloved wife, Linda, and she was one of the members of the feminist seminar, Feminist Studies in Liturgy seminar that I'm a part of. And so probably I knew Linda first and better before I knew you, but I am so glad that we get to continue our friendship in this time. So that is a very dear connection to dear Linda. And the second story I want to say is that when I was in seminary in the 90s, I was the recipient, I believe the first year that the Order of St. Luke gave the Hoyt Hickman Award for Excellence in Liturgical Scholarship to seminary students, and I got to receive that at St. Paul School of Theology, where I was graduating that year. And so those are a couple of connections.
Still being awarded every year to outstanding students.
Yes, and very important that we recognize scholarship and the work of seminarians and scholarship as they begin to prepare for ministry, and some of them prepare to go on to do PhDs like I did.
Just slight correction.
Okay.
It's for liturgical scholarship and practice.
You're right.
Theoretical knowledge, but the ability to put it into practice, which is what you do.
That is absolutely right. I kind of sort of lived into that award big time.
I think so.
Well, that's wonderful. So, Dwight, we're going to talk about the book that recently came out this year, I believe, right? 2020 it came out. There it is, a Lukan Psalter. So I would really love for you right off the bat to tell us a little bit about what the book is, and we're going to get into how it was created, but just tell us a little bit right off the bat. What is the book?
The book is a psalter that is not meant to try to deal with historical, critical commentary. It is designed for private and public prayer. It is for that kind of usage, so it is a liturgical psalter in the sense of that its use in prayer is the primary focus of our work. There are other psalters where you can do the other kind of work, but this one is for that kind of use.
Yeah. Well, and that's the way that we're using it in this series. This worship series is based on the Psalms that show up in the Revised Common Lectionary, Year B for 2021. And when I was thinking about how I could help support the Worship Design Studio churches in their worship in this extraordinary time, we know January, we're still going to be dealing with this pandemic. And it's really been a difficult time in many different ways. whether you've lost loved ones, which many have, we've all lost a sense of a way of life or a rhythm of life. And so to go to the Psalms, to this body of material that was really created over a course of time from exile and isolation, which we can metaphorically use that in some ways for ourselves at the moment, to the rebuilding of community, which we hope will be part of 2021, that rebuilding of our gathered communities physically. I thought the Psalms are a perfect body of work. And so I looked for a translation that would help us to bring this beautifully to our people, and ran across your Lukan Psalter and thought that the language was so beautiful in it. Let's talk a little bit about what is a Lukan spirituality you talk about in the front matter of the book. And also then we'll get into how it was created out of that sense of a Lukan spirituality.
Well, maybe a little story about that. There was a point at which in the Order of St. Luke, we had a retreat that was focused on, well, should we really be trying to be Benedictines or Franciscans or Cistercians? No, probably not Cistercians, but
or Trappists.
Thought we to try to find some niche in this long history of religious orders that are not cloistered and not just celibate and not just males or females. We're a dispersed order. We're men and women. We're lay and clergy. We're ecumenical. All those kinds of pieces, and we were trying to figure out how we should understand that that role of a largely Protestant dispersed order. Mm-hmm. And as we talked through it with the help of Dan Benedict and Barbara Troxel that year, it gradually became the discernment that no, we weren't any of those things. We were our own thing, because Luke and Acts give us a spirituality that's important. It's liturgical. Mm. Our great, the Song of Mary, the Song of Zechariah, the Song of Simeon, the Gloria in Excelsis, all of those come from Luke. And the concern of Luke for the poor and the marginalized is such an important part of that spirituality, but it's also very prophetic and countercultural. It just calls people to attention, and it's communal. It focuses primarily upon the way in which we respond as a group. And finally, it's apostolic in that we're sent out on a mission to do something in the name of the God whom we worship and the Christ in whose way we seek to be formed.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so how did this particular spirituality give you a lens to look at the Psalms?
Well, we were looking for a translation that we could use, and we kept liking some things about some, but they didn't do this that we thought was important. And we actually started working with Psalms, looking for this and including it in our publications back in 2008. We've been at it ever since. We just couldn't find one that quite did what we wanted it to do. We thought for a while that the Order of St. Helena's would do it. It's a very beautiful translation, adapted from the Book of Common Prayer, can be sung easily, chanted well, but sometimes it just didn't do what we wanted it to do. And then one of our members, Brother B.J. George, had given us I shouldn't say way long ago, but a decade or so ago, the translation by the Priests for Equality. And we began to look at that again. And one of our members, who was a scripture scholar, Cheryl Brown, looked at it in terms of its fidelity to the Hebrew text. Mm-hmm. Her response was, "This is the translation I've been waiting for all the year." It is inclusive. That was one of our givens. It had to be an inclusive
Right.
text, but it didn't just tinker with pronouns.
Right.
It actually went back to the Hebrew and tried to communicate a term that's dear to you and me, the depth dynamic of what was in those Psalms and how they communicate itself. And the more we worked with that, the happier we were, though we discovered that even in that translation, we weren't always satisfied. And part of the project of being involved in this over the years was that we'd be reading along and we'd come to a line and we'd get to a word and someone would say, that one, I don't think that one works. That one is too raw, or it's ugly. Sometimes we would say that word, it doesn't have, one of our favorite terms was felicity of language. It doesn't have beauty of language, or it communicate clearly. We don't know what is that trying to say. And so we would go to Order of St. Helena, and maybe it would work, and maybe it wouldn't. And if it didn't, we went to all the other translations that we could. We tried to find out what the meaning would be in the Hebrew, and we pounded it out line by line, phrase by phrase, and sometimes word by word. You could talk to the team. There were times when we spent a half hour or 45 minutes on a single line.
Wow. Well, what a labor of love.
What we came up with then really satisfied all of us as communicating as clearly and as beautifully as possible, while still keeping that raw prophetic edge that's there.
Right.
We're not looking for it to be comfortable.
Right. So one of the differences in what you all did in the Lukan Psalter and the inclusive version that you draw heavily on is wherever it said the letters for the name of the Lord, you inserted Adonai. And I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
All of the translations from way, way, way back have struggled with what to do with the way we transliterate it over is YHWH. An earlier generation decided they would put vowels into it and came up with Jehovah. Today's world puts different vowels in it in a different way. I believe that the tetragrammaton, we call it, which is a fancy word for 4 letters, that the 4 letters are unpronounceable, as well as the tradition being that they weren't pronounced. They weren't pronounced because you couldn't pronounce them. They need vowels in there, and vowels aren't in there. And of course, the Jewish tradition had to come to terms with this too. Early on in synagogue worship, they're going to use it there. They're going to use it in the temple. When they use the Psalms, what are they going to do? Well, they put some vowel markings under that, but they were the vowel markings for Adonai. Let me back up and come at this from a slightly different direction, and that is, what does that tetragrammaton, that YHWH, what does that mean? And here you have to go to the context of God's revealing it to Moses at the time of the covenant, at the time of the giving of the 10 Commandments. You discover that it's a covenant name. The way that I say this is that we all have different names. Sometimes I'm known as Dr. Vogel or Professor Vogel or Reverend Vogel. And then there are other people who know me, although in American culture, everybody would like to say that they'd like to know me. So all kinds of people call me Dwight, which is fine. My students did most of the time. But you know, I do have some other names, and I'll probably not be, no, I will not be sharing those with you. They were the names that Linda gave. We call them Pillow Talk names, covenant names, names of such passionate presence. That's the clue. Passionate presence. The YHWH is the divine one who is passionately present. And is that without any tense? You can't put tense in it. It's not was what was, is what is, will be what I will be. I think Clarence Jordan used to say, as he would deal with this, I was what I was, I am what I am, I will be what I will be, I just plain is. So this isness of God that is passionately present for us needs to communicate some way that the term our God, which is the convenient way, at least it puts it in the plural, our God, might do, but it just didn't work. And we didn't want to try to pronounce YHWH, being both convinced that you can't pronounce it in the first place. And in the second place, there are those still in the Jewish tradition who do not pronounce it. And I think they're wise in that regard. So what are we going to do? Well, Adonai is what was used in those communities for a long time. We're very much aware that it has its own problems. Adonai sort of means the Lord, and that is what King James Version and after that did. They thought, well, if we put it in capital letters, then people will know that that's the Tetragrammaton. I don't think most people know it's the Tetragrammaton at all. They may not even have realized that, oh, sometimes it's in capital letters and sometimes it isn't. Well, I wonder what's the difference between when it's in capital letters and when it isn't. So we just used Adonai in caps the same way for this isness of God that is passionately present for us.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah, so, I hear several goals in what you said, and that is a sense of inclusive language that helps us all feel like we're part of that. We can all raise our voices feeling like we're part of that. And as well, that beauty of language that helps it come trippingly off the tongue, because it's meant to be offered in speech or song. It was the songbook of the Hebrew people, and so it's meant to not just be silently read, although that's one of the ways you can do it, but it also has a performative aspect of it, that the words, the meaning of the words come also with the speaking or the singing of the words. And so that was a tall order. What a labor of love. No wonder it took you a while. And we're grateful for that.
And that reminds me, your comment there, that as we work through it, while we started out, I think, expecting that we would have a Psalter that was chanted throughout, we discovered there were some psalms that didn't lend themselves really well to chanting. And having been across the street at Seabury Western for their sung matins in the morning and sung evening prayer, there were times when it just didn't quite work, even though I love to chant the Psalms. Mm-hmm. So we included some that are to be read dialogically, some that are to be read by a single voice, and some of them are so troubling that we finally ended up saying, this one probably should be read silently and pondered, as we recognize this is an uncomfortable part of our own lives, but it's something that contributes to public and corporate worship in that other kind of way. John Wesley, when he sent the Psalter over here to the colonies, out a number of things and talked about having others that he just wouldn't include because they didn't belong in the mouth of a Christian.
Well, there you go. There's at least a Wesleyan reason for editing.
And all 150 Psalms are in here, and there's a guide to the way in which you can read through all 150 within a 4-week period, if that's the way you want to do it. But there's also a daily Psalm lectionary that doesn't use all of the Psalms in their completeness, but that picks up the treasures, the great treasures that are throughout the book.
Wonderful. Well, I want to, a lot of people in the worship design studio probably are not familiar with chanting the Psalms. So I want you to help us a little bit with that. Now, of the 7 Psalms that come up in this particular worship series, 5 of them in the Psalter have suggestions for certain tones, you call them. And two of them are suggested that to be read silently or by one voice. Dwight, take us through, if we've never chanted the Psalms before, how do we do that?
We wonder, how did people in a day before musical notation, before there were those notes to put on the page, before that had ever been invented, how did they sing? We know they sang the Psalms. Sure they did. They say they do. The early church did. We don't really know for sure, but we do know some things about human nature. So think about the way a child begins to sing. I remember we were on the turnpike in Pennsylvania, and we went through a very small tunnel, and we said to our son, Pete, "Oh, that was a baby tunnel." And he began to sing. "We went through the tunnel. It was a baby tunnel, and we went through the tunnel, which was a baby tunnel for miles and miles." Now listen, what's going on there? Most of it is on one note. There's a little variety along the way, and it enables prose to be sung. We're singing hymns that have meter and rhyme. What to do with prose? Well, this is a way. Most of it is on one note, sometimes many words, sometimes only a syllable or two. And then we've got a little passing thing to make it fun. So after all this on one note, we go up, un. Then we come to a median, down. And then we do the same thing over again. And so there's some more on one note, and then there are passing notes, and we come to another ending place. Da 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 da. The wonderful thing about chant is you can sing chant if you don't know how to read music. It is simple music. It is accessible music. It is fun to sing because after you've done it for a little while, you don't have to think about those notes because they keep being the same. And you can really let the psalm sing in you instead of your singing it.
That's lovely. That's lovely, Dwight. It makes me want to go find a really great acoustic place. You know, I have been known to sing in tunnels or overpasses or someplace where you get that resonance. And if you know just a little bit of this singing on one note and then altering every once in a while, you can sing whatever's on your heart in a place that rings and it sounds amazing.
If you're at Cashel in Ireland and you get into Cormac's Chapel at a time that nobody else is in there, the dynamics of that space in terms of its auditory power are fantastic. I always wait around until everybody else leaves so I can chant in Cormac's Castle. Chapel.
And I've been known to be in places where I'm visiting, and I don't care if anybody else is there. I just sing anyway.
Good for you, Marcia.
Okay, so you're going to help us with Psalm 29, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Now there's an antiphon at the beginning and at the ending, which sort of provides a lens through which we understand the psalm. And the tone to which it's recommended this be sung is tone 5, which goes, tone 5 goes, da 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 da, da 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 da. So maybe you just want to kind of sing along with me. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. So here's the antiphon. Give glory to Adonai, you heavenly court. Give Adonai glory and strength. Give glory to Adonai, you heavenly court. Give Adonai glory and strength. Give forth the glory that God's name deserves, and worship Adonai in the splendor of holiness. The voice of Adonai resounds over the waters. The God of glory thunders over the raging seas. God's voice is powerful. God's voice is full of majesty. The voice of Adonai snaps the cedars, shatters the cedars of Lebanon. It makes Lebanon skip like a calf, and Syrian like a young wild ox. The voice of Adonai strikes with bolts of lightning. The voice of Adonai shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of God twists the oaks and strips the forest bare. And in God's temple all cry, glory. Adonai sits in judgment over the flood. Adonai is its ruler forever. Give strength to your people, Adonai. Bless your people with peace. Glory to you, O Trinity, most holy and blessed, one God, now and forever. Amen. Give glory to Adonai, you heavenly court. Give Adonai glory and strength.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And you can see how once you get that, the notes that go up and down, you're just paying attention to the notation in the book to tell you when to go up and down. In fact, let me just show at the beginning of the book, for those of you who are going to get the book and, you know, and learn to practice this, in the beginning of the book, it says about chanting the Psalms. And there's a little instruction there about the notes and about the asterisks and the black notes and the underline. So just give us a short lesson there, Dwight, on these.
Okay, the practice of arranging psalms for chant was called pointing them, because there was a red dot that was put over the top of a place. That's rather limiting because a red dot can only go over one little spot. And it also costs money to put it in red. So,
Right.
so instead of pointing it with just one dot, we underline. So if you're coming along and you come to that underline, it can be more than one syllable. Over the waters instead of just on the waters. So the underline says that's where you change. And then the italics at the end of the line say that's where you do the last note. And again, instead of just being restricted to one syllable or two, you can have several syllables there that are indicated by the italics. Then the asterisk just says you're in the middle of the tone. That's where you go to the next reciting tone. And then you do the whole thing all over again. You've got the reciting tone, to which there could be one or many syllables. You've got two passing tones, indicated that you move to that at that point with the underlining. And then you've got another italicized syllable or series of syllables to which you sing to the last note.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So if you're looking at what I've got on the screen here right now, which is a different psalm, but you can see that Psalm Tone 1, a little different from what you just sang, but there's the opening note, which looks like a whole note, right? It's an open note, and that's what you stay on as you sing all those words. Then that where it changes, that would be your underline, right? That's where you would, at the underline, you would go to the next notes, and then the next whole note at the end of that phrase is the italics, right?
Right. There's just one little variation on that,
Okay.
and that is the first note. Probably would be wiser not to call it a whole note,
Right.
because it's square.
Right. True.
The fact that it's square means it's not really a whole note, although the eighth notes aren't eighth notes either, nor the half note. So we aren't consistent thereafter.
We're not really worried about tempo or timing or rhythm. We're just.
It looks like a whole note, so you can call it a whole.
Right. So that open note, whatever you want to call that, at the beginning of each one of those measures is really the note that you're staying on most of the time until you get to an underline. Then you do the little flippy dippy, I'm going to call it. And then when you get to the italics is where you want to land on that next open note. Yeah. And so there's two for each couplet there. Yeah.
And one other little clue about this is the chant is meant to be sung gently. Da 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 da. Da 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 ta 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 da 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 ta ta ta. Sometimes people have called that the Anglican stomp, but I think that's unfair. So,
Well, and you know what we were talking about earlier about resonance. You want to imagine that you're allowing it to resonate. And so you're not going to attack it like that. You're not going to stomp on it because you want it to, you know, you want it to carry and resonate. Yeah, beautiful. I hope that those of you who are doing this focus on the Psalms at the beginning of the year will, you know, take some time to experiment with that and to see what it feels like, see what kind of a prayer posture that brings up in your voice. One of the things I've been lamenting about this pandemic is that I'm not singing very much, you know, and I sing all the time, you know, when I lead workshops, I sing, when I lead worship, I sing, but I'm not singing very much. And it's a real pain in my heart. And so I think one of my practices will be, as churches are doing this after the new year, will be to, now that I have the Lukan Psalter, I'm going to follow the suggestions in there and do some more singing as a spiritual practice. And I think it's going to fill my soul in a way that I'm feeling bereft at the moment. So thank you, Dwight, and all of the team who worked on it.